එක්සත් කම්කරු සම්මේලනයේ සභාපති ස්වාස්තිකා සහෝදරියගේ අදහස් බෙදා ගැනීමට so please join me in welcoming our esteemed speaker Swastika Arulingam, who will share insights on this translation and also today politics. Comrade Swastika, the floor is yours.
Thank you all for inviting me to speak. I thought first I'll start off by speaking about the translator. I was specifically asked by Comrade Vijayapala to not speak about him, but I thought I should. I was, in fact, I was not very much involved in left politics. So it was Comrade Vijayapala, Comrade Amarasinghe and Comrade Linus who invited me to join the Commercial Industrial Workers Union. And that is how I think my involvement with left politics predominantly started. So I'm eternally grateful for Comrade Vijayapala for making that call and inviting me to the Commercial Industrial Workers Union. But during the many conversations I had with Comrade Vijayapala, he would say that now we are doing all of this to see workers in power. He would always say that we want to see workers in power. It's not about you or me going to parliament. It's about seeing workers in power. And it seems very unattainable, particularly in my times when the left has fizzled out, workers are not organized, we go to union meetings and 2-3 workers turn up and so on. But he keeps saying this, and it's not just a ideal where he says we must see workers in power and then we sit and we don't do anything about it. Times may not be right for workers parliament or workers in power tomorrow, but we have to do things. We have to talk theory, we have to debate ideas, we have to learn from history. And I think that is one of the political lessons which I keep learning from Comrade Vijayapala, that even if politics are not aligning together, there are many things which we can do and we must continue to do. In terms of Ernest Mandela's critique of or his writings and critique of the LSSP, Comrade Sumanasiri spoke about the past and what is now known as the great betrayal of our left parties, and it seems as if we are still struggling with it. I thought I'll take some lessons from these writings and speak about contemporary politics, or what is happening right now in terms of electoral politics and elections and coalitions and so on. A few days back, 3 left political parties, many of you would know, 3 left political parties, the Frontline Socialist Party, the Socialist People's Forum and the New Democratic Marxist-Leninist Party, together with many left-leaning activists from the Aragalaya, we came together and we formed a new People's Struggles Alliance. And the first few questions which came were from comrades from the left who have decided to support the NPP during this election. And the questions were not in bad faith, but they asked us this, finally we have a party which is challenging the status quo. So why do you want to form this alliance and disrupt that momentum? And I, of course, would give many answers to that, but some of the things which Ernest Mandela had said, even back in 1964, I think, proves true even today in terms of what is happening in politics. And one of the things in his writing he says is that left parties often worry about being isolated. In his writing he says, sometimes we are worrying about being isolated, but sometimes isolationism is good. Sometimes you have to take a step back and not really accept the New Deal, and particularly when the New Deal comes from a party which is moving towards bourgeoisie interests and bourgeoisie class interests. Sometimes it's good to take a step back and take the path of isolationism, and that could actually yield results. So that is one thing which perhaps I want to remind critiques of this new alliance, that simply because we have decided, many of us, many left parties together, many Aragali activists have decided that NPP is not the path we want to go, does not mean that it is the wrong path or it is a path which has left, which we should not take. And in fact, I strongly believe that the alliance is a left coalition which is going to bring in a left discourse into this election narrative, which has been sorely missing at this point. And when I was reading this, few other things which struck me as telling in terms of LSSP and the comrades whom when I first entered left politics and heard conversations, we would hear great things about NM and Colvin R. De Silva and so on, and I still think they are greats. But when you read it from the view of Ernest Mandel, you find a very critical view or eye on the way they did politics, on the way they got into coalitions and so on. So I want to speak about few of those things, not in terms of personalities, but in terms of some political mistakes or what Ernest Mandel considers as political mistakes, which I think is very important for us to think about also. He was speaking about the formation of Left Party, the LSSP, and the composition of LSSP, and the leadership of LSSP, and the way the LSSP was run. He speaks about leadership, which largely consisted of English-speaking people, a class of people who have gone to the UK, they have studied, they have been influenced by communism, and then they come back, and then they are leading a group of leading a working class, or supposed to be a left party. And one of his criticism is that despite the fact that it is supposed to be a left party, it's supposed to be a Marxist party, it functioned rather as a left social democratic party, and that is the way actually functioned on the ground. In terms of, for instance, he says that despite the fact that the following of LSSP did not speak in the English language, the creation of ideology or the education cell functioned mostly in English, and many of the leaflets and the pamphlets and even, for instance, the writings of Trotsky were not really translated. So the creation of ideology, or in what direction the party should go, or where you discuss that, was majority in English, despite the fact that the followings of the masses actually spoke in Sinhala and Tamil. Another thing which he spoke about is that in terms of organizing, and which I think we also have to, at this point also we have to really take into account, is that he said despite the fact that it was called a revolutionary party, left party, the organizing concentrated a lot on inviting comrades from the petty bourgeoisie class, and it kind of left out organizing, a serious organizing of workers and the peasantry. I mean, there was an attempt at one point to form a united front of trade unions and workers and so on, but Ernest Mandel considers it as like a one-off thing, and he says the LSSP as a policy did not really seriously get into organizing workers as well as particularly the rural peasantry. He also speaks about the agrarian question, and when I was reading that paragraph on his critique of the agrarian question, I was reminded of Comrade Vimukti De Silva, who always says this to me when we speak about left politics, and she says that, you know, whatever it is these left parties organize, they don't really come and speak to rural farmers. They don't come and speak to farmers, and so the villages and the rural areas are always left to, in fact, to status quo bourgeoisie parties like the SLPP and the UNP and the SJB and so on, because the left does not really seriously consider coming and even leave out organizing, coming and even speaking to the rural youth, and therefore the only political understanding they are getting is from bourgeoisie parties. So Ernest Mandel also says this. Ernest Mandel also says even at that time, for instance, the issues which we are seeing right now, the indebtedness of the rural youth, the unemployment, which is of course on the rise because of the crisis right now, and then of course landlessness. Due to the new land development ordinance amendment which came in 2022, lots of people are going to lose land to the market, and so we are going to see landless also. But are we really, as left, are we really addressing some of these questions? And these are some of the questions which Ernest Mandel critiques about the LSSP even back at that time. The other thing which he speaks about, this is of course very much contested. I mean, we soon after the Aragalaya, we often spoke about power beyond parliament. I myself said that power is always beyond parliament, and to date I believe that. And Ernest Mandel also talks about the mistake which LSSP did in believing that you can actually win socialism through the parliamentary process, or solely through the parliamentary process without an actual social overturn or a social uprising of the people. They actually started believing that you can win socialism through parliamentary electoral politics, and I think that is one of the mistakes which I believe NPP is making, but I'm not so sure that NPP is any longer left, so that is my opinion of the NPP. But we also should not fall into that trap. Now this alliance is also standing for electoral politics. So we are standing for electoral politics to bring certain discourses into the electoral debates and discussions, but we also should not, even this alliance, this new alliance, should not fall into the trap of thinking that socialism is going to come just because few of us get into parliament, or even if in the unlikely circumstances we actually win the elections and we come to power, suddenly we are a socialist government, or we are going to bring socialism into power. So I think the LSSP, Ernest Mandel believes LSSP made that mistake. I'm not in a position to say whether the LSSP actually thought that or not, but he says that it's a mistake to think that the socialism or social structural change is going to come through this, or solely through parliamentary electoral politics. The other lesson which I think is very, very important for us, two more. I'll just say two more things and maybe close. One is about coalitions, and we also have formed a coalition, but one of the things which Ernest Mandel tells in terms of the LSSP policy is that when you get into a coalition government or a coalition election front, particularly with the bourgeoisie party, you must be conscious of who is in power. If you're not in power, if the left party or the radical Marxist party is not the one who is calling the shots, you're going to always lose out. And that's what we saw when LSSP joined coalition with the Sirimava Bandaranaike government, is that we were not in a bargaining position to use that coalition to win what we wanted, to bring that social change. We were not in power. So coalitions must always be formed when we are in power, or not when we are in power, when we are in a place of power where we are able to bargain for something, or not even bargain, we are able to win something in terms of the workers, and eventually the idea is to kick out the bourgeoisie elements. So that it is only then that we should get into coalition government. Otherwise, we need to constantly think about organizing workers and pushing for a workers' revolution. And the last thing which I think is quite important is that I'm glad the comrade Dhanush Gihan Patna just walked in, because the other day we were having a discussion in our union meeting, and he said, which I didn't quite accept at that time, but he said, if workers decide to go on strike tomorrow, it's not for us to say this is not the right time to go on strike. We may think that it is wrong, this is not the right time and so on, but if workers decide to go on strike tomorrow, as leaders we have to find a way to support it. I'm not very convinced by the argument, because Ernest Mandel at one point says the masses are not always right. Masses has differentiated from workers, but he says masses are not always right. But in terms of this point that when workers go into direct action, we have to support it. The LSSP, Ernest Mandel is saying, the LSSP, when the people were going into hartas and strikes and popular uprising, they were giving the impression that people did not want to go into a direct action. They were giving the impression, the LSSP was giving the impression that people actually thought that the parliamentary route was the way for a social change. And so therefore, they were actually pulling back people from direct action and pushing them into this parliamentary route. The reason why I think this lesson is very important for us today is that after the 2022 uprising, of course, it was broken with the military intervention. After the 2022 uprising, the lesson which the left should have learned is that there is an appetite for direct action. I mean, this was not an organized action, it was not a left action, but people came together in millions, right? So people came together and they wanted a system change. Of course, it was, politically very diverse. The left did not have power and so on, but there is an appetite for people to get into direct action. And even now, strikes and protests are happening. So as a left alliance and a left party, despite the fact that we are standing for elections or going into an electoral coalition and so on, our idea should always be towards how do we push people, how do we encourage people, how do we not even encourage, how do we stand by people when they go into direct action and not discourage. And this is the most important thing. Not discourage people from going to the streets, saying that elections are coming, we will resolve it in the elections, don't worry about it, don't go into strike, you vote us to power and we will resolve everything. That is the worst thing a left coalition or a party which is claiming to be left can do to the people of this country. And that is one of my biggest critique of the NPP is that they are giving this idea that once we come to parliament, tomorrow everything will be right. And that is not the history of Sri Lanka, that is not the history of the world. So I hope our alliance would be different. We would not give that impression to people that parliamentary election is the way forward for social revolution. People have asked for this. Maybe we're not calling it social revolution or a revolution towards a socialist state. That's not what people call it. People call it system change. That's okay. It's a different name. But I hope we keep that essence in every single politics we do. We have called for power beyond parliament, and that call must always be there, despite the fact that we are going into electoral politics. And the mistake, the great betrayal which the left did in the 1960s, we should not repeat that. So I was reading this document, and of course thanks to Comrade Vijaypal, I was reading this document. I was reading this document and learning lessons as to what we should not do in terms of a left alliance when we move forward. Thank you.